Whoever you are, whether you castigate the Krebs cycle or find apoptosis ataraxic, hello. Today, I would like to tell you 3 stories. I'll leave the plausibility of each of these stories up to you to decide. The first story takes place about 5 years ago at Stansted Airport, where a man sits waiting for his flight in the food court with a burger. I use the words man and burger with some creative license in this story because the man was me and the burger was vegan. The burger ticked all the usual boxes, being juicy, creamy, tasty, all the best adjectives. But it was only exceptional because this was the first food that I had ordered at a restaurant since deciding to stop eating animal products all those years ago. While I sat there waiting, scolding myself for not making this lifestyle choice decades earlier, my mind wandered to the origins of eating in general, a perfectly normal thing for anyone to think about. It occurred to me that in the approximately 4 billion years that life has existed on Earth, only recently have a few members of one species decided to switch their diet, not for any adaptive reason, not to bestow a competitive advantage, not because any selection pressure blesses a plant-based community with more offspring, but simply because those individuals collectively decided that the well-being of other sentient species was worth more than their own taste pleasure. Now, I must admit, this first story isn't a very good one. It's a bit preachy and doesn't solve any great mystery. A much more intriguing story is that of how life could have got started on the ancient Earth billions of years ago. This is still a puzzle that the greatest scientific minds are yet to solve. But for my second story, I'd like to make the case that this is not the deep, impenetrable philosophical mystery that many suppose it to be. In fact, with a few simple ingredients, a long enough preparation time, and the right initial conditions, life itself may be an inevitable product of that first primordial wiggle soup. Before we can discuss the origins of nutrition, metabolism, and biology, we first need a working definition of what life actually is. This is surprisingly difficult because each time scientists offer a prescriptive definition, a list of things that life needs to have, something comes along that breaks all the rules and yet is incontestably alive. So we'll have to make do with a descriptive definition, a list of characteristics that all known life happens to possess. By convention, teachers like to point to the acronym Mrs. Gren for a checklist of living properties. But it's my personal position that Mrs. Gren may be due retirement, so let me suggest the acronym CHEESE to take her place. An ingredient that my Veggie airport burger omitted, but certainly didn't lack. First, C. C is for carbon. No matter where life gets going in the universe, carbon should be the first choice, if not the only choice, of foundational elements from which to build it. There's only one group of elements in the periodic table that allows for 4 bonds to be made from a single atom. Silicon and germanium are 2 other elements in this same group that allow for 4 bonds, but because the atoms are huge, the bonds they form are far weaker and less stable. Only carbon offers these maximum bonds available for chemical reactions and stable molecular structures. It's no coincidence, then, that all life on Earth is carbon-based, and if I were a betting man, I'd think that all alien life would probably be made from carbon too. H. H is for hereditary. Whatever else life might do, it must be a coded system of matter capable of replicating itself. This doesn't need to be the DNA molecule that we know and are. A crystal could provide some kind of template from which more crystals grow and break off, providing an alternative mechanism for inheritable change, or so I've read. But all life must provide some kind of copying mechanism that is passed down through generations. This may be the only way for a life form to cope with changing environmental conditions, adapt, and evolve. E is for energy. Every chemical and physical process in the universe, whether it's alive or not, must obey the 3 laws of thermodynamics. The third of these laws relates to entropy and allows for stable structures to spontaneously form as long as the total disorder of the universe increases overall. Just think of waves, snowflakes, and hurricanes. These do not break the laws of physics, but they are structured and often long-lasting. Life, too, is another kind of localized complexity that is created when energy dissipates. All the chemical reactions of life are powered by energy dissipating through systems in strict accordance with the laws of physics. So life is not exempt from the third law, it is produced by it. E is also for enzymes. Something is needed to channel this energy through life systems efficiently enough to perform tasks. Enter enzymes. Just like stirring sugar into a hot cup of tea helps it to dissolve, enzymes speed up chemical processes that would naturally happen on their own anyway. Scientists call this a catalyst, and having a catalyst present means you need less energy to get something done. Think of ice melting on a road. This is inevitable over time, but sprinkling a little salt, a catalyst, gets the job done faster. Enzymes are life's biochemical salt, or swirly spoons. S is for separation, or segregation, or small spaces for sequestering specific stuff. There doesn't seem to be any way around this one. Life needs to be cellular, or compartmentalized at the very least. If all the ingredients of life stayed diffuse, swirling around in an ocean or in a cloud of gas, they could never become concentrated enough to sustain chemical reactions. Some container must keep everything together, separating an outside from an inside and only letting the right stuff in. The final E is for excretion, which is the only initial that I've borrowed from our beloved Mrs. Gren. She also chose to include movement, but I don't think that really tells us very much. Reproduction, which describes most chemical reactions. Sensitivity, which is cute, but ignores coma patients. And growth, which seems optional. Mrs. Gren, bless her, also includes initials for respiration and nutrition, which I think we can lump together as energy. This leaves us with excretion, and life can't go without it. If the little bag of concentrated, self-replicating chemistry that we've envisioned couldn't get rid of its waste products, the whole process would grind to a halt. Nothing stays alive for long if it's incapable of giving a shit. So there we have it, the cheese of life. While each of these facets must have been essential for the emergence and continuation of life, at least by my estimation, cheese reveals something that Mrs. Gren doesn't. With one single exception, everything on the cheese list regularly takes place in the non-living, non-biological world of geochemistry. Rocks. As the origin of life is what we're searching for, it's impossible to overstate the significance of this. Continuous, everyday interactions between rocks and seawater take us 6 of the 7 steps towards life. It's old news now, but the list of complex molecules that are essential for life keep turning up in asteroids in outer space. The list includes hydrocarbons, carboxylic acids, and amino acids, which are the material from which proteins are made. Geochemistry on Earth, as it is in space, is rife with carbon. All chemistry relies on a transference of energy, and many reactions take place in the presence of natural catalysts. Porous rocks create inorganic filters, which naturally concentrate and turn over chemical ingredients. So what exactly are we missing? What initial haven't we accounted for? H. Some form of heritability seems to be the tricky bit. Why is this the case? The reason the universe isn't teeming with life everywhere we look probably comes down to 2 conditions which are quite rare. The first thing we need, if it wasn't obvious already, is that all of this chemistry needs to be taking place immersed in some kind of liquid. All of those ingredients and chemical precursors need to move around in order to collide with each other. Liquid water is part and parcel of the machinery of life to such an inextricable degree that it's hard to view water as merely a convenient option. It is possible that other liquids could do the job, but the versatility of water and the subtlety and scope of reactions that it facilitates suggest that water, like carbon, may be unique in its ability to nurture life. While not conceptually impossible, it seems preposterous to suggest that any system of chemical inheritance could emerge in the absence of water. But liquid water itself is not rare in the universe. Astronomers are finding it all over the cosmos. The catch seems to be getting all of life's chemical ingredients to gather together under alkaline conditions. Why? Because in any other environment, hydrogen gas will not react with carbon dioxide to create organic molecules. This is the only way to coax carbon to do that stuff what living stuff do. With this environmental profile, we can now refine our search for where life may have begun on Earth. Whatever it was like, first life could not have gone roaming around looking for energy. It must have begun where energy was already plentiful, and the water was alkaline. So, bring back the cheese and riddle me this. Where on Earth might we find a constrained through-flow system with a continuous supply of reactive carbon? Exactly! Deep-sea hydrothermal vents. They are the smoking gun that litters the sea floor. Alkaline vents are formed by a chemical reaction between olivine, one of the most abundant minerals in the universe, and seawater. This process is called serpentinization, and it produces oodles of hydrogen gas. As seawater trickles down between the rocks of the sea floor and comes into contact with olivine, hydrogen gas is created, which expands and cracks the rocks apart, allowing more seawater to rush in. This serpentinizational process of cracking, whooshing, and fizzing is also exothermic. The heat it produces forces boiling water full of dissolved hydrogen gas back up to the sea floor, where it mixes with the cold ocean water and causes any dissolved minerals to precipitate out. Over time, whole landscapes of these hydrothermal vents build up along ocean fault lines. Some of these towering, knobbly, turd-looking chimneys are over 60 meters high. So much gas in the water makes the porous walls of these structures thin and honeycomb-like, a bit like pumice, only with far, far smaller micropores. The mixing of hot and cold water in and around these structures causes those first ingredients of life to become concentrated in those little cellular pores. This process is called thermophoresis and is similar to the way that a bucket of Lego can sort itself out by being shaken, with larger stuff coming to the top and the smaller pieces falling to the bottom. Sorted as they are inside this honeycomb structure, it's important that life's first primordial ingredients stay separated by a very thin barrier, with the alkaline vent water on one side and the open ocean on the other. This is because if the sea is vaguely acidic, as it most likely would have been on the early Earth when the atmosphere was full of carbon dioxide, something profoundly interesting occurs. In effect, the vent itself becomes an enormous geological battery. The thing about acids is they like to donate positively charged protons. And the thing about alkalis is they like to hoover protons up. This positive charge will naturally flow down the chemical gradient like electricity. Those organic building blocks shifted, sorted and concentrated inside teensy little protocells, bathed in an inexhaustible supply of reactive hydrogen gas in a natural electric field, provides all the energy needed for new complex organic molecules to combine and grow. As the biochemist Nick Lane puts it in his book The Vital Question, quote, "Geochemistry gives rise to biochemistry in a seamless transition from the inorganic to the organic." End quote. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know. What a wonderfully elaborate and completely fictional story you have just spun. And I would be quick to agree with you were it not for the fact that every single step in this complex process has been demonstrated in the lab. Under the right conditions, this is just how the chemistry behaves. It can't not do this. What remains is for scientists to observe this happening in the wild without humans deliberately manufacturing those ideal conditions. This is unlikely this side of a global apocalypse, because if the composition of the atmosphere and the acidity of the oceans were like that of the ancient Earth, then all the scientists trying to observe life's second emergence would be dead. On top of this, even if the whole process could be observed today, and it did produce new life, there's no way to know for sure that this is how life got started the first time. What actually happened at the origin of life can never be known for certain, but the discovery that each of these steps do in fact occur in nature all over the sea floor does help improve our confidence in the general hypothesis. Another indication that we're on the right track comes from the fact that octopus, trees, mold, katydids, and pigeons all use the same proton gradient to drive their metabolism. This, the way that carbon is cycled, the reliance on chemical energy, and the ubiquity of similar catalytic processes is universal in all life forms today, suggesting that each of these processes has been faithfully preserved since life's earliest beginnings. Perhaps counterintuitively, it would have been absolutely essential for those first replicating molecules to achieve no more than mediocrity when copying themselves. To endure, under any conditions, anywhere in the universe, life needs to duplicate itself imperfectly, while avoiding a catastrophe of runaway errors. Too perfect a replicator could not adapt or evolve to survive, but too shoddy a mechanism would never be able to code for much of anything. We can also be confident that the first life would have required more energy, not less. This is because the processes hadn't been refined. copying mechanisms would have been highly energetically inefficient, with adaptations gradually allowing for new proteins to be assembled, which would more efficiently catalyze chemical reactions. Each new suite of abilities would open up new areas of the vent system to be colonized, affording new opportunities for competing populations to gather resources, grow, and replicate at different rates. The word for this is natural selection, and it's what we need to evolve more complex metabolic machinery and a true inheritable code like DNA. Those chains of instructions that turn molecular building blocks into functional proteins are the H, the hard bit of cheese. While the exact steps from protein chemistry to DNA still need to be mapped out in finer detail, there's really no conceptual difficulty with where all the carbon, energy, and catalytic reactions came from that could have jump-started the process of life. From then on, any copying error that gave you a competitive advantage would have improved your odds of surviving with Mother Nature's blessing. Improvements can also be made to the surface membrane of individual cells, helping them to maintain their own proton gradient even as they break free of the vent structure itself. Genetics reveals that whenever the first free-swimming cells arrived on the scene, they carried around 100 or so genes that are still present in every living thing on the planet to this day. These code for things like ribosomes and antiporter pumps and ATP synthase, complex cellular machinery that allows life to keep existing out here beyond the vents. What all this amounts to is that life may be an improbable chemical accident, but not a miraculous one. For something like it to occur within the scope of what's thermodynamically possible, the universe would have to be very, very old and very, very big. Luckily for us, our universe happens to be both of those things. With such a vast amount of space, time, and materials at its disposal, like an incalculable number of chemistry sets all performing randomized experiments simultaneously, the odds that something as improbable as life will appear becomes almost inevitable. Because the starting materials for life are commonly found all over the universe, it's actually surprising not to have seen any aliens yet. Keep in mind that while life has existed on this planet for 4 billion years, in all that time, there's been little evolutionary pressure to become intelligent or work together in moral global communities, let alone to leave this planet and visit other worlds. In Wiggle Soup episode 20, we touched on the mysterious absence of extraterrestrial life, but for my third story of the day, let me propose an alternative hypothesis to resolve that mystery. What if real intelligent alien civilizations are out there, but they're deliberately avoiding communication with the Earth until its residents have developed sufficient moral and political standards to warrant contacting? If this is so, perhaps the availability of plant-based vegan burgers in airports represents the latest step in humanity's embarrassingly slow crawl towards ethical maturity. It's food for thought either way. I took these pains to try and convince you that while deeply puzzling, life needs not be supernatural or extraterrestrial in origin. Next episode, I'll try to make the case that life, all life, every population of living things on the planet today, including humans, is still evolving. It logically must be.